Hi, today it's all about investments in weapons. My name is Sasja Beslik and welcome to Sustainable Profits, and please do not forget to subscribe. Today I'm going to talk to you about investments in weapons, and probably many people out there are wondering how does this impact you and in what way can you take either some profit out of it or how you can avoid this. And the thing is, depending on where you're coming from, there is an interesting development that many people need to understand around the world, which is related to weapon investments in the world, and also what are they actually depending on, and also what is the thing that they can create. Looking at the numbers, the last 3-4 years, defense stocks around the world have been delivering between 10 to 15% return. This is, of course, much less than investments in semiconductor and AI-driven industry, which is closely correlated to investments in defense industry, since we nowadays around the world are using more and more artificial intelligence, which is called a dual use, to support the military industry and also the effects or the damage the industry can create for different kinds of purposes around the world, either to defend democracy or actually to challenge democracies in many places. Nevertheless, what is interesting is that globally, the world is spending about 2.5% of global GDP on defense industry. And this has been increasing over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years, going back to 2008, when we had a financial crisis and the middle classes around the world had to bail out banks and financial system. The investments in the weapons have been increasing, and it's very much correlated to the fact that the number of democracies in the world are decreasing. You may ask yourself, what is really happening in this space? What is happening? There are two things. One is the debate, and the debate is happening in European Union as well as it's happening around the world, if these investments can be qualified as sustainable. The main reason for this debate is the fact that many protagonists in the industry are claiming that development and further use of defense industry to protect democracies is something that should be qualified as sustainable. In the same time, many people in the industry are really questioning the objectives and morality of this investment, because knowing how industry works and knowing also how the use of these weapons can be misused in many places around the world, it's creating a lot of questions if this is really possible. My personal view is that weapons cannot qualify as sustainable investments for the simple reason is that sustainable investments in the core have something that is called do no harm principle. And as we know, of course, weapons when used can be used in many different ways and create a lot of havoc. And I had personal experiences back in 1991 through to 1993 when I experienced these weapons in close range, directed directly at me and many people that were living with me at the time. So I have a bit of a personal angle to this one. Now, there is an interesting thing that I've been looking at myself, and that is very much related to the global GDP correlation with the weapon investments. It's called defense industry. For me, it's actually the weapons industry. And there's also a sort of a narrative way or semantics that is used to sort of portray it as something that is very defensive. In fact, as we know, of course, it can be used as aggressive and defensive tools. Now, numbers. 2.5% of global GDP spent on weapons annually. We talk about $22.7 trillion that is globally invested in weapons every year. And given the fact that we have increasing geopolitical turmoil and unclear rules of engagement and lack of any sorts of international rule of order right now, it's quite obvious that many countries are looking at the ways how they can increase their defense budgets and how they can invest more in these kind of weapon systems, defense systems, ships, submarines, rockets, all of these other things. Now, what I find very interesting is that if you take that number and you sort of play around with it, we could actually eradicate poverty with this kind of money. And what is also interesting, and people don't really know about this, is that compared to what we invest in peacekeeping things around the world, which is in many cases the UN's peacekeeping forces and activities around the world, we are investing 140 times more per year in weapons than we invest in preventing war or peacekeeping operations around the world. We are investing approximately between 60 to 80 billion dollars a year in protecting peace, preventing war, doing things that could actually make human life better, safer going forward. And in the same time, we are investing $2.9 trillion in weapons, and that investment is increasing around the world. What I find very interesting, and I've been in this space for 30 years, is that now in many parts of the world, including European unions and many European banks, are classifying investments in weapons as sustainable. The main reason for that being the fact that the European Union is looking at the way in Europe how to change the classification of do no harm principles, which is one of the core principles in EU taxonomy, so it cannot harm the European weapons industry. And the thing is, the changing of this sort of a use how sustainability investments are defined and shaped is hopefully in many ways, the hope is coming from the lobby of weapon industry in European Union and other parts of the world, that this will increase the funding and also capacity of this industry to deliver better returns on the investments made in them. And of course, if you're looking at the short term, a lot of these investments in weapon industry will provide you with some returns, but that's very short term related. If you're looking at the impact on the GDP from productivity point of view, that's between 0.6 and 1.2 for weapon industry. And for education would be 3 times more. So it's quite clear if you're looking at it from a GDP perspective and if you're looking at it from investment perspective in the longer term, investments in other sectors will be probably more profitable and also provide you more productivity for the country that this is happening. Now, with this said, we know that sustainable investing has been changing shapes and forms, and it is encompassing a number of principles. But going back to the weapon industry in itself, people usually do not understand that weapon sales and exports are generally controlled by governments, and investing in weapon companies, producing companies, and very limited number of them are stock listed on the markets around the world, is really not changing so much dynamics of how much you can protect yourself from somebody that wants to hurt you. So one of the best things to do, and this is something that has not been debated a lot, and it is one of the technical things, and it's quite obvious concrete things, and I've been talking about this for years, is that if European Union really wants to sort of increase its capacity to protect itself, the best way would be to issue European defense bonds and offer that to European population to buy, and by doing that also support European Union or national states to develop the defense industry, weapon industry, any kind of industry they want, so they can protect European Union borders. Now, this would be a much safer way of controlling what is actually happening with these weapons than just investing directly in the companies that are listed on the stock market. Very clear thing. I'm not saying you should not invest. I'm just saying you should do that in a way you can actually control how the proceeds or actually the weapons are used further down the line. And we know, and this is a very important topic, that we don't want to invest in things that hurt us. And we don't want to invest in things that are creating the world that is even more unsafe and rigid in so many different ways. And the reason why I'm saying this, and I have a personal experiences from this, is the fact that I don't truly believe that weapons or increased number of weapons in the world will lead us to safer, more stable and more sustainable world. The more we increase spending, the spending will be increased by countries and regions that are wanting, that in many ways are challenging the order in our countries or the way how we see the world or what kind of values we have. So I think investments in another industries, it's far more interesting, and it could be in the long term also far more profitable. Now, there are different ways of looking at this. Of course, some people will view investments in the weapon industry as something that is very good for themselves, for their kids, family and nations, and for the returns. And it's up to them. It's your choice. In the other way, you can actually invest in something that is completely different, generate better returns over time, and create that is more safe, stable, and sustainable. At the end of the story and in the beginning of the story, it's always about you and the choices you make. What is important to think about is, of course, from the investment point of view, in the long-term perspective, defense stocks have been, quite boring investments over time. The much more interesting industries are growing up around the world, and I will come back to you and talk to you about that in the next session.